You guys actually wore your Gamecock baseball helmets in today. I understand a 7-4 loss against Presbyterian is not probably the ideal circumstance for you to come in and start hour number 3, but the Gamecock baseball greats, Trey Dyson, Bryon Jeffcoat in. I'm impressed that you guys are here. Yeah, well, that's the really impressive part. It's the only part of the college wardrobe that still fits, I'm guessing.
I like the cleats. They came in the cleats, too. Like, I was like, wow.
It is alumni weekend.
Right.
So we're getting ready.
All right. The bosses will not appreciate the spikes being in the studios, but we appreciate that. It brings the atmosphere in. The smell of the locker room, probably another thing that we don't appreciate. That's just us trying to be professional, trying to fake it.
Yeah.
Trey, I'm glad you're being overly professional. You look like you've never been in a radio studio before, finally getting the mic up to your mouth.
I get in here, I get so excited, then I'm like, we only have an hour.
Then he sees us, he's like, these guys again. They're going to hog the mic, and I don't get to say as much as I want.
Only 3 pep talks.
By the way, I took Monday and Tuesday off, and so I went to lunch with some people. Your Masters pep talk has gotten rave reviews.
Really?
Your Masters
you like that, don't you?
I'm not saying I liked it because I remember what I was trying to do.
It's not my particular cup of tea.
That morning, I was trying to get Tim was out that particular morning. We did that, and he had sent a text message, something we had to do as part of the program. And
Thank you, Tim.
We had Pearson in, and so as you read that thing, I couldn't have. If you'd have said just say one word. Just any word that I said in the entire 60 seconds, I wouldn't have known it because
you were getting prepared to end the show.
To do something. Yeah, Pearson and I had to do something that morning, so I didn't hear it until we played it back, I think, on Monday. And I caught that part. But no, that your Masters pep talk, man, a couple of people I ran into, first they asked why I wasn't at work. And then they were like, man, that Dyson pep talk on the Masters was phenomenal.
Well, you go ahead.
Well, it's like a soup, the more it gets better. The more you listen to it.
I've never heard the soup. I've heard the wine. Okay,
wine.
Soup. I'm with you.
He does live in prosperity.
Is that how they start making wine and soup? Is that like, okay?
We call it, man. We drink it like soup.
I was going to say, what was the word that Bill used? The one. Go ahead.
You want to hear this one?
I can't hear anything with no headphones.
Civility.
But anyways,
there's headphones.
Here's the thing about
we did
Bill.
Give both of you guys headphones.
They're sitting
They're
right beside
the helmet.
Bill is he's got good awareness though. I remember when we were here the other day, and I was talking about the Broad Street Bullies.
Yeah, Flyers, man, we're getting whipped.
Yeah, but you didn't know who they were.
Now you're
using Broad Street Bully references on the air. Do you think? I think that's good. I think you either did some research or subconsciously you just learned it through osmosis. But
5-0 last night. They take it on the chin at home.
What? Right.
The
The Broad Street Bullies would never have allowed that.
No, they've allowed it twice.
No,
7-0 to
he's
start.
saying the original Broad Street Bullies. Come on.
They would have gotten ejected before losing 5-0.
That brings us, I think, to the next. I mean, that's a tradition. You got to keep that going. If you're a Flyer, don't you have to keep that tradition going? I mean, that's part of it. I mean, if you're a Gamecock, don't you have to keep the tradition of Trey Dyson doing goofy stuff?
Apparently not.
Okay.
Okay.
Apparently not. Not to mention, I'm depressed too because we got smoked 6-0 last night.
Blythewood baseball you're talking about?
Yes. So I'm just
Lexington though. That's Bryan's alma mater.
You're the hitting
Bill's
coach, right?
alma mater.
Yeah, wear it.
Yes.
Okay. So
wait. I thought didn't you have a guy hitting a home run for the first time last night? That was against Spring Valley the other night.
That was Madison Stokes' brother.
Okay.
Jansen Stokes. He's a sophomore.
But not last night. That was against Spring Valley. Because if you hit a home run in a 6-0 game, I got a lot of questions for you.
But that's what we try to do, though, especially when we're down 6-0.
Got overturned.
It's grip and rip, baby. Get your name in the paper somehow.
So the hitting coach that's in studio with us produced 0 runs last night.
That's what I'm hearing.
Okay.
Well, I mean, the guy was unbelievable.
I once hit a home run off CC Sabathia.
I'm sorry?
Foul.
That's a great story.
Then I walked.
Okay, you got on base. You're good. And you hit a home run off of him. All right, 7-4 against Presbyterian. Look, the last time we had this conversation with you guys was Friday morning. Just days later, this conversation completely changes, right? They win 3-2 at Arkansas to start the series opener. Maybe, you guys mentioned Drew Meyer, your teammate, putting out the tweet. Maybe you look back at the end of the season, and this is the game that changed things around. Unfortunately for Carolina, on Saturday, doubleheader, 2 7-inning games. You get one guy to third base. You don't score a run. You lose 2-0, 3-0 to Arkansas against the number 3 team in the country. Nothing to be embarrassed about, right? Nothing to hang your head about. That happens. I get it. Not scoring a run is very disappointing, but losing those 2 games, excusable. Coming back home Tuesday night, Presbyterian, 275th RPI. You lose 7-4 at home. Inexcusable, I'm guessing you guys feel. And from a former player standpoint, this just adds another in-state school now to the list of teams the Gamecocks have lost to this year. Your feelings about this? They're both giving me blank stares here in the All-South Federal Credit Union studios right now.
Well, to be fair, I did say that, I wasn't feeling all that great about the team still,
right.
Even after they won on Friday night.
You mentioned that Drew might have been overstating things or overly optimistic after the 3-2 win against Arkansas. That's what you're saying, right?
Kind of, yeah. I mean, based on the way it was presented, I don't know exactly what he said, but I just don't see anything overly special that leads me to believe that we can win a lot of games.
I ask you both of y'all this, and I really shouldn't bring it up at this point, but I wasn't here. Y'all were in here Friday. I was doing Heath's show, and one of the things that I put out on Twitter as I kind of went back and was doing that show was that if South Carolina had won that night, your ace is on the mound, because you're saying you didn't see anything special. I think Tim and I, had we done the show together on Friday morning, would have completely disagreed, right? Like, you seemed, from what I'm gathering from the way you were doing the Friday morning show, pretty positive about the baseball team. You go on the road, you throw your freshman, the one guy that maybe you're not counting on as much to give you something, and he gives you a good performance, and you win 3-2. And you're going into Friday night with Adam Hill with your ace on the mound and a chance to get to 7-7 in league play, which after a 1-5 start, I don't think anybody would have said getting to 500 was possible. And then all of a sudden, here we are today.
What I'm saying is, they won that game. That was awesome.
Right.
Incredible efforts. Then you've got Adam Hill and Cody Morris, two guys who could be, rotation guys in the big leagues in a couple of years, But still, even with that, playing with house money, even with these two studs coming up, I'm still thinking, it's going to be really hard for us to win.
Right.
Well, why do I think that? Because I don't see that fire, that you need on a daily basis from every single guy on the team to be able to make it happen, even when you've got complete studs going to the mound.
And knowing your background, you're an emotional guy. You were the emotional leader back in the day for the Gamecocks, and especially that run to 2002, Ray Tanner's first College World Series team. Bryon, you come at it from a little different angle. You're much more of an even keel guy, I think. So what do you see from this group that might be a little bit different, or do you see it similarly to what Trey sees at this point for Carolina, knowing they're sitting here at 20-17, more than halfway through the season?
It's been hard to wrap my head around it, I think, as most people. I mean, it's frustrating. I was somewhere where Drew was, thinking, man, this might be a game to look back when they beat Arkansas. Now, remember, it wasn't like they put it on that night in Arkansas. It was a close game. Arkansas did not get some big hits.
Right. Time after time, right? And, Bill, that was the difference, I think, in our conversation on Friday morning, is that this year's team finally made those plays in the clutch as opposed to the last year and a half. We basically hadn't seen that in close games against good teams. Carolina making plays, and we said the difference would be now moving forward, you got to back that up with another win to win a series, and obviously that didn't happen.
Didn't. And, I was a little worried when the doubleheader came, when we didn't play Friday night, and then look, last time I was a part of a 7-inning doubleheader in Arkansas, it didn't go well either. So, it didn't set up well, but I thought Adam pitched well. It was offensive. Our offensive woes are continuing, and that's been the frustrating thing for me because I'm not looking at it as you go up there as a hitter, you get a hit, always get a hit. You want to think that way. I want quality at bats. I want a battle. And, we saw that in the first game against Arkansas, I believe. They're studs on the mound. And Noah Campbell leads off the game with 8-9 pitch at bat. Those are the type of at bats that we got to have more consistently. And then you got to have the at bats in the moment that are going to produce the big run, the big hit. And we saw that in the Presbyterian game. We're down 3 runs, and LT Tolbert gets the triple. And that's a big hit. And then those are the times where you take the game over and you start to, Presbyterian's not the team that's supposed to hang with you. Are they going to score runs on you? Absolutely. They can do that. But you can't let them win the game. So as I look at it right now, what I feel the challenge that these guys have, and again, a lot of these guys were here last year. They didn't win like we wanted them to. They got to learn how to win. And winning doesn't mean you always are going to play your best. Winning a ball game, finding a way to win. Sometimes you have some ugly wins in there, but they're wins. And I think there's what Trey's going back to is this intensity that you have inside of you in those moments that you're going to get the job done. You know who you are. When I get on the field, when I was, back in the day, and what was on the Gamecock uniform, putting that on, and I came to your park or you're coming to mine, I was going to let you know when you played me, I'm in it. I'm going to battle you, and you might win, and I'll tip my cap. You do, but it wasn't going to be because, I'm going to just think that you're going to come in here and take this win from us. So that's what these guys are. So, they've got to get that, and that starts with your leaders, your team leaders, and identifying who are those. Jonah Bride, LT Tolbert, Olsen. But, it's hard. It's hard.
We had a conversation the other day. You see these kids hit doubles and stuff or triples or whatever and act like they just won the World Series once they get to second base or once they get to third base. Like, no. You don't do that. You celebrate once you play with emotion, but no, you celebrate once you take the lead or once you come back, you tie. You certainly get fired up throughout the process, but I don't know. I just think some of the emotion is like, I don't know.
Misplaced.
Y'all sound frustrated. Y'all as former players, it's coming across to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, and again, it's fascinating for me to listen to you two each time y'all come in here because you're so polar opposites in how you approached the dugout in the game. And it's fun. It's fun, and I've got a lot of compliments on how y'all do it because Bryon obviously is a lot quieter and is a lot more like I'm going to do my stuff on the field, and I'll lead by example, whereas Trey, I got the impression you let everybody know. Everybody knew how Trey was feeling that day.
Right. Well, I mean, and too, Bryon, don't let Bryon fool you. I sent Bryon a picture. I sent Drew Meyer a picture. Back of the old days, I know, dude. I know we didn't face dudes throwing 98 with sinkers and cutters and stuff like that, like these guys are having to face today. But we have those guys too on our side, that can do the same thing. But Bryon, I sent him a picture of him. Clearly, this dude was safe on a tag. And there's a picture of Bryon holding up his glove, like looking at the umpire like he's the dumbest person ever. I mean, that's the type of stuff I'm talking about. Like, you fight for every single inch you have to, because if you don't, you're going to lose. The competition's too good.
But it's something that I feel like it's become in these segments with y'all. A common theme is that the intensity, and I don't want to say the want to win, because I don't think the players are showing up out there going, well, if we win today, that's great, and if we lose, who cares? I think those kids show up at the ballpark every day wanting to win.
Right.
But I do think, and I think we all agree on this, there is a different mentality. I was talking about it yesterday. I played my son in basketball, a little pickup game in our house on Tuesday night, and I beat him. And he went to his room and he cried.
Well, you didn't just beat him, and then you celebrated.
Well, okay, but that was a different. There's a whole lot more to that story there. But he went, and I went and I told him, and I said, I love that competitive spirit. Now, what are you going to do next time to not have that happen? He said, I'm going to, and it was kind of a teaching moment because I want him to be competitive, not just in sports, but in life in general. When you go for a job and there's 12 other candidates, it does no good to come up second. It's no good, and there is a competitive spirit. And I feel like at times this team, even though they want to win, they don't have that. And I feel like that's what you're like. Correct me if I'm wrong. You guys are the experts. I'm not. If you want to talk donuts, I got you taken care of. But if you guys want to talk baseball, and I feel like that's where y'all are coming from right now. And I feel like there's a frustration from y'all as former players and people who look at the program differently than a lot of us. You don't see that.
So I think part of that could be just the inconsistency from winning. You need a win streak to start developing that. Guys start to believe in that. And they haven't had much of a winning streak at all this year, maybe 4 games in a row.
5, I think, is the most early on.
And so there were stretches where we were playing. I remember 2000. We were 21-0. lost a few. Then we went back on another long run
and finished 50-6 for those of you who don't remember.
And they weren't. I mean, we choked at the end of the year. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, but that's we own up to that. It wasn't like we weren't making excuses. We choked.
I take the blame. I was at game 1 when y'all beat Lafayette, and then I went to the beach.
That was the last college baseball game Bill
I
went
think
to.
Brandon and I went to the beach.
Yeah, what are you doing?
We left. That was Bryan's brother. Brandon and I went to the beach for senior week or first week or whatever. We'll take the blame for that.
But when you step in to play a Presbyterian, Charleston Southern, whatever, you got to be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe we get to play these guys today. No offense to them, but you're trying to hit 2 home runs. I mean, this is when you get your stats, and we're sitting out there struggling. Trying to beat these teams nowadays, that's certainly frustrating.
Well, certainly 7 runs in the last 4 games, 4 runs coming against Presbyterian in the last 3 games combined, getting shut out 2 times before that. Mark Kingston saying this team's in an offensive funk. You guys, a couple of guys who avoided offensive funks for the most part in your Carolina careers. We'll get your expert analysis about how Carolina might be able to get out of it, especially facing now LSU coming to town this weekend. That's coming up next. They're Gamecock baseball greats. Bryon, Jeffcoat, Trey, Dyson in with us this morning. It's the early game. It's 107.5 The Game. Rolling along here at hour number 3, talking a lot of Gamecock baseball, former Gamecock baseball greats, Trey Dyson, Bryon Jeffcoat in studio with us here. Bill, you were just talking with them off air, which of course is a pet peeve of mine. I did not crack the whip. Normally I'm like, no, we can't waste the good stuff. Keep it for on the air. You were talking about how baseball is just different than other sports. And typically if you have a more talented team in a football game or a basketball game, what you said 9 out of 10 times, those teams are going to win. Baseball, it's a little different because you can have one pitcher out there who can dominate or just match up with a lineup in a certain way, and it brings a totally different feel. Or you can hit balls hard all over the yard in baseball, and for some reason they'll just land in gloves on a certain day. Your point, though, was that you don't know exactly how to assign responsibility or accountability at this point.
Yeah, I don't. It's weird because we've seen great South Carolina teams. You talk about y'all losing 2 to Louisiana Lafayette. And for all I know, that was a great baseball team. They went on to the College World Series, but y'all were really, really good. We've seen a College World Series champion go on the road to Francis Marion, a D2 school, and lose, and that's South Carolina a couple years ago.
Runner-up in 2012.
Okay, there was that. I thought it was the year before when they won it. I'm sorry.
But those are isolated incidences. And what we've seen here in the last year and a half is different for South Carolina baseball.
But you say they're isolated, and I agree, but it feels like in baseball you can have that. Maybe it's because you play more games. Maybe you play 50-plus in a regular season. It's easier to have one bad night. It just feels like in baseball you can have that, whereas in basketball – I don't feel like you see that that often where the bad team creeps out. I mean, obviously there was one this year that would stand out. I think it was Auburn coming here and South Carolina just blitzing right through them in the first half following the
basketball you're talking about.
I'm sorry, basketball. Yeah, it up 37-11 at one point. But it just feels like you don't – baseball is an entirely different sport, whether you have a great pitcher or whether you don't, where it's hard sometimes, I think, for me to go, well, how did you lose that game? How did you lose this game? And it's just an interesting sport. And so I know people – as we've started this week or coming off the PC game, as I started the week on Wednesday, people want to assign blame. That's the natural thing to do. All right, it's this person, it's the coach's fault, it's the pitcher's fault, it's the hitter's fault.
Or even just accountability, if you don't want to go that far as to blame.
Okay, that's a good word, accountability. And I don't know who is to be held accountable right now, and I feel like it's a cop-out to say, well, everybody's somewhat accountable, and they're just not getting it done.
Well, and a lot of the angrier fans might go to still holding Chad Holbrook 100% accountable, but then you look at what College of Charleston is doing this year, and they didn't play very well last year. Chad Holbrook gets that program, and now they're 27-11 at this point. So how do you guys go about this in your frustration, saying, okay, the accountability falls to whom? You mentioned it before, Bryon, where you can't hold a first-year coach accountable. I tried to put you on a percentage. You said, well, maybe 25% accountable for right now. Trey, how do you see this thing when you continue to see these in-state losses mount up? It's 5-6 this year is the Carolina record against schools in the state of South Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's the players are responsible. And it starts with the best players on the team, the way they conduct themselves in practice, the way they work out, the way they show up. Are they helping their teammates in the cage on their own? Are they diving into walls during practice? Or are they big leaguing it? You know, I don't know. I'm not out there, but I would bet that they're not diving into walls or you know, I don't know. I'm just saying, like,
counterintuitive in practice.
You know,
I mean,
we just go back to, you know, what Drew Meyer was our best player, and he was, you know, nasty at practice every single day. He brought the energy every single day. He had a bad back, terrible body, but he brought it every single day. And, you know, the best players did every single day. We all had the same goal, which was to win as a team. No individual accolades. It was just straight up team.
So my freshman year, and I'll speak to what Trey's saying, I didn't dive for a ball in a game. And Coach Tolman, next day when we have practice, he shows up. He tells me to come early. He says, we're having dive practice. I'm like, okay. And so I get out there at third base, and he starts, you know, putting balls out where I have to dive for him to get them. And what he was teaching me was that, you know, there's going to be moments in the game where you got to lay out and you got to stop it. You got to, you know, dive for the ball because it's going to save a run. And you know, we need you to do that. That's part of the game. One of the things that our game is the baseball is transitioned like most sports with technology, with just equipment, things that are the look players are going for these days. One of the things that I think I look back, again, I'm just pulling from my own experience, was all these guys come up to bat with all kind of equipment on these days, right? And I used to have a shin guard because I'd foul a ball off and it hurt, you know. But now they got like one on the arm, and then when they get the first, they put these things on their and I'm
the
like,
oven mitt,
whatever it's called. And so here's my thinking of it. When you're and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but I do think it correlates to a mental. When I stole a base or I slid, man, I got cuts everywhere. I mean, you learn to deal with it, right? Now it's like, well, we don't want to hurt ourselves. You almost, and I think that's just playing into that, like maybe a mentality of being soft versus saying, you know what, my hand's bleeding, tape it up. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to still figure out how to get it win. It does something inside of you as a player when you're hurt, that you get over, you go to that next little area in your mind that says, I'm going to overcome this. I'm going to do it. Versus if you never get there, it's hard to, when adversity starts to come, it's like, man, I don't know how to handle this.
Yeah. Barry Bonds was one of those guys who wore the elbow pad. I feel like he almost made it popular or cool or took it to the next level. He's actually an option on today's Frank's Discount Tire poll question this morning. Who would you least like to get an endorsement from? He's tied for second right now with Drake behind Ryan Leaf. Dick Vitale also an option at Tim Hill 1075 on Twitter, where you can go and vote on that. On the Shepherd's Glass inbox, an interesting thought about in-state schools taking on South Carolina. You guys have a lot of experience with that. We just saw it on Tuesday night not go the Gamecocks' way. Obviously, things changed this weekend with LSU, but I think maybe the midweek in-state schools are the biggest source of frustration for Gamecock fans at this point. I want you guys to talk about that when we come back. Gamecock baseball greats, Bryon Jeffcoat, Trey Dyson in with us. It's the early game. It's 107.5 The Game. Maybe venting a little bit here in the All-South Federal Credit Union studios about high school umpiring. Gamecock baseball greats, Trey Dyson, Bryon Jeffcoat in. Wanted to hit you guys up with this on the Shepherd's Glass inbox. Not only is Drew Meyer sending out pictures of his swing and his body back in the 2000 season in response to being called out here on the radio, we're also getting some feedback from Bryon, who says smaller South Carolina schools take extra pride today in beating powerhouses because those same kids weren't recruited by them. So I'm guessing that's kind of in response to the Presbyterian loss. 5-6 is the record this year for the Gamecocks against in-state opponents. But what stands out to me with what Ryan said, he said today, they take extra pride today. That's always been the case, right? You guys played back in 2000-ish, and smaller schools, typically the guys ended up going to those schools because they would have rather gone to South Carolina or Clemson or wherever, but these games have always been circled on the calendar for the most part for small schools. Like this year, we've seen Furman, Presbyterian, Charleston Southern, and the Citadel all have success against the Gamecocks, and unprecedented success, really. Let's get your mic on over there if we can help them out. There we go.
So,
yeah, I remember going to the Citadel many times, and it was certainly a battle, and we knew that.
But different than, I mean, you could tell the chip on the shoulder was there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you played against those guys either growing up or you played against them in a summer league, and so you knew that they're good players. And the thing about, we talked earlier, talent doesn't equal you're going to be in baseball, doesn't always equal you're going to win. You can't throw your glove out there and expect to have success. And we see that a lot of times. I think because of how successful we've been, and what maybe a lot of kids who are getting recruited who come to South Carolina, maybe that's a mentality that they take on, and I don't know if that's maybe the best thing, that when they get here, because you realize, and I was talking to Coach Current, who's recruiting coordinator, and he's saying a lot of these kids play travel ball today, not only our guys but everybody,
right?
And if they're Presbyterian or Wofford, these guys are playing year round, and they're good. They're playing a lot of baseball. And my point is, these guys, if you give them a chance to stay in the game, they're probably gonna find a way to win, as we've seen this year. So you got to do whatever it is to find a way to win and to make sure that you don't let that happen.
You guys think they're in baseball because of the way it's set up? You can go pro straight out of high school, or you come for 3 years. More parity in baseball than there is in any other sport in college athletics. Because basketball, you got to come for 1 year. So, okay, Kentucky just landed. Well, Duke landed the top 3 players in the class. I mean, is there more parity? You guys have played it. Is there more parity in baseball because of how it's set up to either go professional right off the bat or to go to college? And because of what you just said, it's a little the talent gap is not as wide as, say, if you have a Kentucky playing, a USC upstate or a PC as opposed in basketball, as opposed to in baseball that happening. Would that make sense? Do y'all agree with that?
Yeah, I would agree to that, and I just, like I said,
you know what I said, Trey?
Yeah, I did. I was just like, let Bryon go with this.
If you guys want Trey's thoughts during this hour, by the way, just go to Twitter right now at Trey Dyson.
I'm actually trying
he looked up like, oh wait, we're on air.
No. All I've been wanting to say this whole time is that Bill looks like he's straight out of the Sandlot movie back in the day.
We've got a hat
great
issue.
look.
We got a hat issue here.
It's a backwards hat thing.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Bryon.
Makes my head
there's
look
parity.
good.
I would have said.
Well, you brought it up already about 2000. You guys were the number 1 overall seed. You were 50-6 in the regular season, and Louisiana Lafayette came in a super regional and won 2 out of 3 at the Sarge. That doesn't happen in basketball until this year in Virginia losing as a number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. And still, back in your days, Ray Tanner got criticized nationally for bringing in a ton of players in the fall mostly, and basically having tryouts. And now the rules have been written for the big boy programs like South Carolina not to be able to do that anymore. You're restricted in how many guys you're allowed to have out there, and that a lot of times will dissuade a guy for going and try to fight his way on a program like South Carolina and go into more of a mid-major type program, getting guaranteed scholarship money and going that way. That's why the rule was written, and therefore in college baseball now, allegedly you have more parity. I would just turn to Coastal Carolina as a great example. Mid-major program, roll into a national championship recently as a good example of a mid-major now being able to compete a little bit more and doing it more consistently, because Coastal Carolina is really good again this year. I think their RPI is right around 20 or so. And in college baseball, the gap has closed as opposed to seeing the same virtually dozen teams at the College World Series almost year in and year out.
I think part of it would be, if you're talking to recruiters, especially, the big time programs, it's hard today because they're recruiting guys earlier in the stage of 8th graders. And I mean, if that would have been the case when I was there, I wouldn't be at South Carolina because I was a late developing player.
And ruled last night, actually, the Division I Rules Committee actually changing that now and moving up the date. You have to be at least a junior, I think they're saying, in high school before you can go on a visit now, to try to curtail some of this stuff that you've been talking about, which has been the rule in the last decade or so.
And so, like I said, the challenge with that is when you lock onto a guy and he's doing well at that age, and then another kid who hasn't developed quite yet, and then he starts to, later on, maybe his freshman year in college, he's putting their work in, and again, he's never been told he's been, the best player. He becomes that, and we see that a lot, and those kids end up maybe not making it here, but they go to a smaller school. And
Connor Owings, for instance, there at Coastal Carolina, probably a good example.
Or how about the kid from Blythewood?
Which kid
the
from
pitcher, the pitcher whose name people are throwing stuff at their radio right now because we can't remember his name.
But Andrew Beckwith, you're talking about?
Beckwith.
Yeah.
That boy Tim, always the professional.
So we have that idea that there's more parity now with the smaller schools. You also have the accountability deal, and Eric just hit us up on the Shepherd's Glass inbox, says you absolutely can hold the first-year coach accountable for midweek losses to Presbyterian types, as opposed to Arkansas, Florida, and the SEC not as much, but weaker teams should be wins no matter who the coach is.
And I think Coach Kingston would say that.
Well, you heard him after the game just the other night saying we should not win these games. These should not be losses, basically saying the exact same thing.
You know, some things that I see that could be a little different from an offensive perspective. You know, when you got a guy like Noah Campbell who can run like the wind, and I haven't seen every at bat, but he doesn't show. I don't think I ever have seen him bunt for a base hit. Have you?
A few times he has.
Yeah, I know he's shown it before.
Not as much as you maybe think. A guy with his speed.
Well, how often did Drew Meyer do that in his college
career? He showed
it
every single game.
And this is a guy who's first-round draft pick.
He showed it
right
to change the
dynamic of the at-bat,
defense.
Right.
Sets it up, and we saw that. I mean, I wasn't even a guy that bunted a lot, but I would stare down the third baseman, and he'd look at me, and they'd bring him in, and then you could hit it by him. It's just, again, you're taking the things that happen in a baseball game that fans, people who don't play a lot, don't realize. Those are the things you have to do to become a better player.
Right. And you can set up pitchers and opposing pitching coaches for at bats later on in the game. You know, if you got nobody on base, you're the 3-hole hitter or whatever coming up, you could do stuff like get up on the plate, step over and try to hit the outside pitch just so the catcher and pitcher can come back to their pitching coach and say, hey, this guy's crowding the plate. He's looking to go the other way.
Right. And I think what Trey is saying, and we see it all the time, you can see a really good hitter look really bad on one pitch, and then the very next pitch, he hits a home run.
Or the
and what you're saying is it's almost him setting that pitcher up or baiting him.
Right.
He looked really bad on one pitch, but he might have been setting up, trying to get that next pitch.
For later in the game.
Right.
Or when you got a guy like, Jacob Olson, great player, having kind of a tough year, it's okay for him to lay down a bunt base hit too. I mean, you got to try to mix it up a little bit.
Sure, the offensive woes, Mark Kingston says he's seeing his guys here in the last few games a little longer swings. Bill was bringing this up about being competitive and being intense. To me, I see a longer swing, a guy trying to hit a home run maybe, at taking too much of a burden on himself as opposed to just trying to do what you can do, staying within yourself, trusting your teammates after that. Do you guys see any of the pressing and maybe taking too much onus on yourself when it comes to a particular at-bat?
I think there's a lot of guys that are pressing in the wrong, in the critical moment we need a hit, you maybe see that they're changing their mentality. I mean, sometimes it's in the violent. It can be from how they take a pitch. I can tell if a guy's really he's locked in on this at bat. And again, there's times where you're feeling really good and you don't get a hit, right? I mean, it's not like it's hard. It's not an easy thing to do. However, I think, what Trey says, sometimes the game of baseball is all about adjustments. It's all about making an adjustment. Even when you're slumping, there's also things you can do in a game that can help your team win. And I always look for that. I was a player that always, and Trey was the same way, always thinking about what was happening before it happened, always going back in what happened in the game and how could I do that differently. I would tell any player out there right now, Ned Yost, manager for the Royals, is he still a manager? Yeah. He came out with an app that's like, it's all these situations within a game that can happen, and you have 30 seconds to make the decision. Every player, go get that and just play that game, just because it's something to be thinking about always. And that's the beauty of baseball, that you don't have to be playing the game to learn a lot about it. You can be sitting over there watching the game going on and going, oh, this would have been what I would have done, or this is what we should do.
Baseball Academics is where Google tells me the name of that app is for Ned Yost, but he might want to make an adjustment to that now that his team is 3-13 in the Kansas City Royals.
His guys don't have it downloaded.
I was going to say maybe less time building the app, more time focusing on managing the team.
Hey, shout out.
Sounds like the offseason didn't go well.
Run last night.
Absolutely. We'll let you hear what that sounded like. Actually, a teammate calling it on the broadcast. That'll come up next in our dramatic conclusion of the program. It's the early game. The Facebook Watch, where Whit Merrifield's teammate, Kansas City Royals pitcher Danny Duffy, on the broadcast there, and as soon as he heard it, he knew it. First home run this season for Merrifield. Unfortunately, the Royals not playing good baseball at 3-13. They got beat 15-5 yesterday, but a good moment for Merrifield in his first home run this year. That came the day after Jackie Bradley Jr.'s first Major League home run this year, and the Boston Red Sox on the other end of the Major League spectrum right now, dominating at 15-2.
So if you're 3-13, and maybe you could apply that here, do you make them wear the practice uniforms in games? Do you maybe y'all mentioned the fishnet hats? Trey's making fun of my hats. Apparently, you guys at Blythewood employed that strategy, and it's worked.
Yeah, Banks made the kids wear the practice uniforms.
Okay, and you're thinking maybe the fishnet hats would be a solid consequence of not winning games for the Gamecocks. Are you guys going to bring a bunch of fishnet hats to alumni weekend this weekend?
No,
Is that what you're going to say? Start handing them out to the boys?
No.
Fishnet hats are kind of in. Like
That's
I feel like
Yeah.
that's more like they're like, oh, this
What
is cool.
we should do, we should go give them our uniforms back in the day and our undergarments too. This was before Under Armour and stuff. I mean, think about how terrible that stuff was that we played in.
I mean, what you said about poor Drew Meyer earlier. I mean,
Please tell me you don't still have the undergarments from back in the day.
I mean, I probably have some T-shirts. We wore T-shirts. I remember sweating my, I mean, it was pretty bad.
Tail off. You sweated your tail off.
So, yeah, I mean, just don't wash the uniform, No washing uniform.
Okay.
Get tough.
Lot of rules.
Get nasty.
Okay.
Come on, boys.
So
mix it up a little bit. Get fired up. Go punch something.
So in the alumni weekend
something.
In the alumni weekend festivities, if the old oven mitts go missing for Gamecock baseball, Bryon Jeffcoat, I think, is suspect number one.
I got him.
We're learning a lot this weekend. So LSU a chance to bounce back for Carolina again at home. You guys got some alumni weekend festivities. I'm sure looking forward to that. If you like to get out, Saturday is the day where the alumni will be officially recognized, right, Bryon?
Hey, come on out. Let's have a great environment for these guys. As frustrated as we are, as Trey would tell you, go to LSU's dugout and just wear them out. And that's our strategy. Have some fun with it.
Be classy, be professional,
Hey.
but get them where it hurts. A great line to use for them is, to their players, that swing will never translate at the next level.
Trey Dyson, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for listening this morning.